What happens when a single act of cruelty unravels a web of secrets that could destroy a family and a town? In the sleepy town of Willow Creek, where everyone knew everyone else's business, the annual Harvest Festival was meant to be a celebration of unity. The air buzzed with the scent of caramel apples and the laughter of children chasing fireflies as dusk settled over the town square. But beneath the surface of this idyllic scene, a storm was brewing, one that would expose the fragility of trust and the weight of consequences. Karen Delaney, a woman in her late 30s with a sharp tongue and a sharper ego, strutted through the festival like she owned it. Her blonde hair was perfectly coiffed, her designer sunglasses perched atop her head, and her smile was more a weapon than a gesture of warmth. Karen had a reputation in Willow Creek. She was the kind of person who demanded attention, whether through her loud opinions or her knack for stirring drama. Tonight, she was on a mission to cement her status as the town's unofficial queen bee. The festival's main event was the Community Talent Show, a cherished tradition where locals showcased their quirks, everything from off-key singing to questionable magic tricks. Karen had volunteered to judge, a role she relished because it gave her power. She sat at the judges' table, scribbling notes with a flourish, her critiques dripping with condescension. The crowd tolerated her because, well, that's just how Karen was. But not everyone was willing to let her reign unchallenged. Among the performers was Grandpa Eli, an 82-year-old widower who had lived in Willow Creek his entire life. Eli was a quiet man, his face etched with lines that told stories of resilience and loss. He leaned heavily on his cane, a polished oak stick carved by his late wife, Ruth, decades ago. That cane wasn't just a tool, it was a piece of his heart, a tangible connection to the love of his life. Eli had signed up to recite a poem he'd written for Ruth, a simple but heartfelt tribute. The crowd adored him, clapping warmly as he shuffled onto the stage. But Karen? She saw Eli's performance as an opportunity to flex her authority. As he began his poem, his voice trembling with emotion, Karen interrupted. "Oh, come on, Eli. This is a talent show, not a funeral," she called out, her voice cutting through the quiet like a blade. The crowd gasped, but Karen wasn't done. "Maybe you should stick to bingo at the senior center." Laughter rippled from her small clique of supporters, but most of the audience sat in stunned silence. Eli paused, his hands shaking on his cane. He looked out at the crowd, his eyes glistening, and tried to continue. But Karen, emboldened by the attention, stood up. "Let's move this along," she said, striding onto the stage. In a moment that would haunt Willow Creek for years, she snatched Eli's cane from his hands and tossed it into the grass beyond the stage. "You don't need this prop for your sob story," she sneered. The crowd erupted in boos, but Karen waved them off, returning to her seat with a smirk. Eli, unsteady without his cane, stumbled slightly but caught himself on the microphone stand. He finished his poem in a whisper, each word heavy with dignity, then left the stage to a standing ovation directed not at Karen, but at him. The festival continued, but the mood had shifted. Karen's cruelty had cast a shadow over the night. Watching from the edge of the crowd was Lila, a quiet woman in her 50s who had moved to Willow Creek only a year ago. Lila was unassuming, with soft gray eyes and a habit of listening more than she spoke. No one knew much about her, except that she kept to herself and worked remotely from her small cottage. What the town didn't know, what Karen didn't know, was that Lila was my aunt. And Lila wasn't just any aunt. She was the deputy director of the Department of Justice's Office of Professional Responsibility, a role that made her one of the most powerful ethics watchdogs in the country. Lila had come to the festival to support her friend Eli, who had welcomed her to Willow Creek with kindness when she was still a stranger. Seeing him humiliated ignited something in her, a quiet fury that burned beneath her calm exterior. She didn't confront Karen that night. Instead, she slipped away, her mind already working through the threads of a plan. The next morning, Willow Creek was abuzz with gossip about Karen's stunt. But something else was brewing, too. Karen's husband, Tom, a local real estate developer, had been dodging whispers about shady business deals for years. He'd built half the town's new subdivisions, but rumors swirled about bribes, forged permits, and strong-armed contractors. Karen, always quick to defend him, dismissed the accusations as jealousy. "People just hate success," she'd say, flipping her hair. What Karen didn't know was that Lila had been quietly observing Tom's dealings since she arrived in town. Her job at the DOJ had trained her to spot corruption, and Tom's projects reeked of it. After the festival, Lila made a call to her team in Washington. "Dig into Thomas Delaney," she said. "Start with his permits and follow the money." She didn't mention Karen's name, not yet, but she knew the trail would lead back to her. Weeks passed, and Karen continued her reign of petty tyranny. She spread rumors about Eli, claiming he was faking his frailty for sympathy. She mocked the festival organizers for coddling him. But her confidence began to crack when Tom came home one evening, pale and sweating. "The feds are sniffing around," he muttered. "Something about an audit." Karen laughed it off. "You're untouchable, babe. No one in this town would dare." But someone did dare, and that someone was Lila. The twist came at the town's next council meeting, held in the old community center. Karen, as usual, was there to make her presence felt, demanding a bigger budget for the next festival. The room was packed, the air thick with tension from the ongoing gossip about Eli's humiliation. Halfway through the meeting, Lila stood up. All eyes turned to her. She rarely spoke in public. In a calm, measured voice, she introduced herself. "My name is Lila Harper," she said. "I've lived here for a year, and I've seen the heart of this town. But I've also seen its shadows." She paused, her gaze locking onto Karen. "I'm the Deputy Director of the DOJ's Office of Professional Responsibility, and I've been investigating Thomas Delaney for fraud, bribery, and ethics violations for the past 6 months." The room went silent. Karen's face drained of color. Tom, sitting beside her, looked like he might bolt. Lila continued, her voice steady but laced with steel. "Karen, your actions at the festival were a small but telling piece of a larger pattern. You think you can bully and manipulate without consequence. You're wrong." The crowd murmured, some in shock, others in quiet satisfaction. Lila presented a folder to the council documents detailing Tom's illegal deals, many of which Karen had co-signed or facilitated. The evidence was damning. Forged signatures, laundered funds, and threats against contractors who refused to play ball. Karen's name was all over it. Karen tried to protest, her voice shrill. "This is a witch hunt. You can't do this." But the room had turned against her. Even her loyal clique stayed silent, unwilling to defend her now. Tom was escorted out by federal agents who had arrived discreetly during the meeting. Karen, humiliated, fled the room, her sunglasses forgotten on the table. The fallout was swift and brutal. Tom faced years in prison. Karen, implicated in the fraud, lost everything: her status, her wealth, her influence. The town shunned her, not out of spite, but because her actions had finally caught up with her. Eli, meanwhile, became a quiet hero. The community rallied around him, raising funds to replace his cane with a new one, though he insisted on keeping the old one, scratches and all, as a reminder of Ruth. But the story doesn't end with justice served. Months later, as Karen packed up her empty house, she found a letter slipped under her door. It was from Lila. "You had a choice that night," it read. "You chose cruelty. I hope you find a way to choose better." Karen crumpled the letter, tears streaming down her face. She wasn't sorry for what she'd done, she was sorry she'd been caught. And that was the bitterest twist of all. Karen hadn't learned a thing. Eli, now a regular at the community center, continued to share his poetry. He never spoke of Karen, but his eyes carried a quiet strength. Lila returned to her work, her role in the DOJ still a secret to most of the town. And Willow Creek, it healed, slowly, reminded that even in a small town, kindness and cruelty both leave ripples. ND.